Well, after a couple of trials and tribulations, getting our technical gear up to speed, it is finally working here. It's bright and sunny in the afternoon in Chicago. We got a lot of light coming through my window there. And it's the sun is probably getting down to the horizon in Ireland, where my good friend David is coming together with me for a chat about A Course in Miracles. So how are you, David?
Great, Chris. Good to see you again. Excited to continue our discussion. I like the way that these discussions we're taking our time with them and we're going nice and slow. And we're still on the same chapter, but we're about to move on to a particularly important part of this, I think. And it talks about, maybe there's a few people who haven't, they're not totally familiar with A Course in Miracles. And there's a few big points that come up in this next section that it will reward us, I think, to just look at definitions of things a little bit. And that might help clear up a few points for people who are wondering what the heck we're talking about here sometimes.
Exactly. It's always fun to get the bounce back from people. When I've been doing these discussions with different people now for about 3.5 years, and so there's quite a video library on my YouTube page. But one of the things that people are often challenged with is the fact that the Course runs almost 180 degrees in the opposite direction of all the conditioning we have as people living in a material world with a mortal outcome. And, we glorify death, we turn death into a monument and a shrine, and we consume death. We have to kill dogs and cats and pigs and cows and chickens in order to keep the body alive, or if not going that avenue, we have to kill half the garden to consume life in order for us to stave off death. And that's what it all comes down to. There's roads that all are leading back to that one central idea of the absence of God. And if God is life, then the absence of God is death. And so it's a matter of changing our awareness, changing our mind about the nature of life and what life really means, and how we can transcend the cycle of falling into death over and over again.
Well, one of the things when you were talking there, it came to my mind that I remember Ken Wapnick saying one time, he was saying, you were saying about, the evidence of death in the world, and, we have to kill animals, to eat food and everything. And I think even if you're vegetarian, you don't get off the hook, because Ken said that every time you breathe in, you're killing millions of tiny bacteria that go into your lungs. And that'll suffice for 5 or 6 seconds, but then of course you'll have to do it again. So this section talks a lot about what is real and what isn't. And it talks a bit about certainty. What are we certain of? And that ties in what you were saying, because what is the one thing that we're all certain of here in life? We all say that it's taxes, and the other one, of course, is death. Death and taxes are the two things that we think are unshakable. It's the central belief of the world. And, the courses, we're talking about the language it uses, and it does help to have a conversation about it and try and explain little lines here and there, because it can be disorienting or make little sense to when we're coming from that old conditioning we had, that old way of thinking, that sort of maybe even sometimes religious way of thinking. And remember, of course, this is not a religious text. It is a spiritual text. It's a psychological text. Or it can be a holy book for you, if you like. But I totally get what you're saying there, Chris, on that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually, kind of, as you start to get into it, I mean, you go through different cycles of, being unsettled and having the ego pushed over the edge, and then it becomes reactionary. But after a while, it all starts to become like this bizarre divine comedy, and you're actually able to see the humor of it all. But it to go into a funeral home and laugh at the bodies in the caskets is probably socially highly unacceptable. But as we get deeper and deeper into the course, you can actually imagine yourself doing that and saying, "Well, you silly thing, you just popped out of one body, but you can't kill yourself, you can't die, and you will come back into another body until you figure that out."
Well, that's it. It's how many times around do we want to play the game? And you're absolutely right. I mean, nobody would ever say that you should go into a funeral home, and which, of course, there's reports that some people can be like that when they start doing the course. But it's about course. It's about being normal. It's about just being loving. And you know what that is. You know what that is. Generally speaking, certainly we have an idea of what the form of that is. But this is more about the content, the real stuff that's going on under the hood, and getting to the that mindset that will bring you peace and will bring you bliss, nice gifts, and also it's applied to your daily life. And we were talking earlier, Chris, about the fact that we have needs here in the world. We all have needs. We all have things that we have to pay the bills. We have to put food on the table, and the course it's a tool that will help you not necessarily get those things, but it will help you while you're getting them. It will give you greater peace of mind, and because the ego ultimately will debilitate you and will make it difficult for you to get those basic needs met, so you can start to move up your hierarchy of needs, if you like. Now, you don't need anything, of course, is what it really says in a very fundamental level. But of course, we do think we need things. So you have to start where you're at. If you have needs, use that peaceful place of mind to start making decisions that will move you forward. And that's I love the course. It doesn't say you don't have to give up anything. It's just about establishing a stronger relationship with a part of your mind that you forgot about, you forgot existed. So it's beautiful and it's helpful, and I'm looking forward to delving in here.
Exactly. Well, we're starting off with chapter 20, the vision of holiness, and it's part 3, section 3, the gift, or no, pardon me, it's sin as an adjustment. And we do have to make adjustments in order to believe that we have sinned and therefore should be punished for our errant behavior. So you want to take the first paragraph there?
Absolutely. So the belief in sin is an adjustment. It's a change we made. And an adjustment is a change, a shift in perception, or a belief that what was so before has been made different. So every adjustment is therefore a distortion, and calls upon defenses against reality. So there's the term defenses. We're talking ego defenses here. Knowledge requires no adjustments and in fact is lost if any shift or change is undertaken. For this reduces it at once to mere perception. Now there's that word perception. It's putting that up against knowledge. So there's the two things you need to look at: knowledge and perception. To this impaired condition are adjustments necessary, because it is not true. Who need adjust to truth, which calls on only what he is to understand? So that section is interesting. It's called sin as an adjustment. And sin, of course, when we all hear it, we think of it's something terrible. You're going to go to hell, and you're going to be punished for these terrible things you did. That's the old way of thinking about sin. The Course is all about seeing sin as a false idea that you separated from everything, from your brothers, from your higher mind, or your creator, or source. So it's an adjustment. It's a sin is an adjustment. So the Course starts off and it starts telling us what's true and what isn't true. And if it's true, it can't be jeopardized. And if it's untrue, it doesn't exist. So in order to create this world we have of perception, we had to look at what was true and we had to make little adjustments to it. And that's what perception is. Perception is sort of the opposite of knowledge. Because knowledge is, think of knowledge as you know something with absolute certainty. There is no doubt whatsoever. And what are we in this world truly ever certain about? Not very much, okay? Because we live in perception. People always have two ways of seeing things. There's a subjective truth here. And that is not knowledge. That is the ego's attempt at knowledge. So for this reduces it at once to mere perception, a way of looking, which certainly is lost, and doubt has entered. Okay, so perception is just a way of looking. That's one way to think of it. It's a way that we created. It's a little embellishments we made on the truth of who we were, and that's what we use every day.
Yes, it's all a fabrication built upon sensory input. And when I was prior to discovering the Course, I was very much into New Thought and Christian Science and some of the other modalities out there that were heading in the direction of the Course, but they weren't complete. The beauty of the Course is it gives you, a complete picture of what's going on and defines it very clearly. But within all of the New Thought schools and within Christian Science especially, one of the first realizations you arrive at is that if you can see it, taste it, smell it, hear it, or touch it, it's not real. And, when you encounter that kind of thought, the ego, of course, gets hysterical because it likes to keep you trapped in the idea of being a body. So once you start to relax behind that idea, you have that sudden shift of awareness where there's no need for sensory input because you are all of creation. You have that realization that you can't miss out on anything by being blind or by being deaf or, whatever. So we're looking at that advance, this radical shift, and how it starts to move you away from believing everything that you're seeing, and perhaps even arriving at that next stage, which is the recognition that what you're seeing is a projection of what you believe in that moment.
Yes. There's a line in the Course, I think it says, there's nothing so blinding as the perception of form. So it starts off, the workbook lessons will talk about things like nothing in this room means anything, or I do not know what anything in this room means. So it's challenging us from the very beginning of this work to accept that maybe the things you see, the things you sense, the things you hear, they mean only what we think they mean. They don't actually have any meaning at all. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about how attached we are to our senses. So if anything happens to us, or, we think of if anything was to happen to our vision or something like that, the panic that ensues, which tells us how attached we all are. There's nothing wrong with this. This is very normal. How attached we are to our senses because we think we rely on them so heavily for our defense, and we're very vulnerable without them. When really what the Course is saying is that true perception has nothing to do with form. It's more about content, the inner world that we that we cultivate, and that is what actually is real. And then we, of course, we take that, whatever we discern that to be, and we project it onto this world that we see around us.
Absolutely. And then, we look at icons in civilization like Helen Keller, who was blind and deprived really of all senses. She couldn't hear, she couldn't see. And yet after her journey through her lifetime, she left a legacy of very empowering ideas. A person who was so hideously disabled by human standards had this celestial understanding of the process of life around her. So, we do get the refutation every once in a while of all the things that we think we believe in. So moving on to the second paragraph here, it says, adjustments of any kind are of the ego. For it is the ego's fixed belief that all relationships depend on adjustments to make of them what it would have them be. Direct relationships in which there are no interferences are always seen as dangerous. The ego is a self-appointed mediator of all relationships, making whatever adjustments it deems necessary and imposing them between those who would meet to keep them separate and prevent their union. It is this studied interference that makes it difficult for you to recognize your holy relationship for what it is. And that is a huge shift in awareness right there, because again, we're always determined to have a relationship, whether it's an intimate one or just interpersonal with people around us, that has established boundaries. And whenever I hear people talking about, well, I have to set up my boundaries, I always chuckle, because a true relationship is a union of the mind. And in the depths of that, you have to arrive at a point where you have nothing to hide. So you have to become completely and utterly transparent. And that's what is being suggested here, that the body and the ego's agenda is to obscurificate the nature of relationships and to keep people apart by denying that merging of the mind where two people become one in consciousness. And ultimately, that's what we are going to eventually all arrive at, is that place where there is one single non-dualistic existence that in human terms would probably be best described as the ecstatic life, where it goes beyond just peace and bliss and, being in a state of ecstasy because of the profound depth of love that we share with our Creator.
When I read that, I totally agree. And I read that, the thing that came to me was the ego makes adjustments. So your relationships are perfect. You have perfect relationships, but the ego insists on making small little adjustments to things to have the relationship as it sees it should be. So think about that for a minute. I mean, think of romantic relationships. Think about the person who presents themselves to you in the relationship. Do we ever try to manipulate that person? Do we ever try to judge them for something that they did wrong? Or do we ever try to control them? Do we ever wish they were different in some way? Think about a parent with their kids. They might insist that the child goes to school and gets a good education because that needs to happen, and unless that happens, that's not good enough. So it's all about the needs and expectations and desires and little demands we place on people in these relationships, rather than just accepting them as they are, they need no adjustment. No adjustment needs to be made to who they are. really on the level of content, which we're talking about, they're perfect. And from that mindset, that love and headspace, relationships become whole. They become, you actually join with the other person. Now, the next section in this is a very interesting one, because he starts to move away a little bit from, telling us what the definitions are, what we're talking about, and it gets quite direct here. It says, a simple question yet remains and needs an answer. Do you like what you have made? A world of murder and attack through which you thread your timid way through constant danger, alone and frightened, hoping at most that death will wait a little longer before it overtakes you and you disappear. So that's the ego's story. That's the ego's belief. You made this up. That is one line, one sentence. You made this up. It is a picture of what you think you are, of how you see yourself. A murderer is frightened, and those who kill fear death. All these are but the fearful thoughts of those who would adjust themselves to a world made fearful by their adjustments. And they look out in sorrow from what is sad within and see the sadness there. So that's a very powerful section there, Chris. And he's really laying it out. You made this up. We made it up. We made the whole thing up. And a very direct question is, do you like it? Do you like what you see in the world, in your life, around you? Because the problem is not outside you. You made it up. It's in your mind. It's inside. It's at the level of content, not of form. So I think that's a very, very powerful and direct section.
It absolutely is. One of the things that really comes across here is that recognition that what we're dealing with here is a idea that is so fearful that we're always kept under the influence of fight or flight. The concept of oblivion, the concept of dying and ceasing to be. On one level, we have this need to believe that we are timeless, endless beings, because that's simply the truth filtering up into our mind. But the ego is constantly trying to reinforce the idea that you are being pursued by the skeleton with, that instrument of harvest. The Grim Reaper is right on your heels. And the minute you fall, you will just not be anymore. There will just be a total cessation. What has failed to communicate to you from the ego is that the ego is afraid of that annihilation simply because it knows that it is not real. So your ego is always going to be in panic mode, trying to shore up your belief about who you are and what you are.
That's an important word to use there. Your ego is kind of always in panic mode. So we have this idea that something is lurking in the background or in the future, and it's going to end very badly for us. And the trick is to bring awareness into those thoughts that you have. And we don't just have those thoughts in the obvious dangerous situations. Something that came to me a while ago when I was thinking about this was cleaning your room. Say if you have a messy apartment or whatever, your room needs to be cleaned up and you're beginning to feel anxious. So you think, oh, well, I'll clean my room. If you look at that very deeply, that anxiety or that need to have things in, what it's really doing is it's a kind of a little attempt to control things, to make things right, to avoid the spiral that will come from letting go of control. Now, I'm not saying you have to become a slob now or anything like that. It's just all about just bringing awareness to the thought processes that are going on a day-to-day basis. So, if we think we lose control and we let things slide a little bit, that will lead to something else, and that will lead to something else. And inevitably, at the end of that sequence, there is disaster. So while we're not always consciously thinking of death, it does show up in little anxieties that we try to control in our life because of the impending doom that might lay before us that we believe in. So, yeah, very, very interesting stuff.
And very immediately applicable. I mean, there's nothing obscure about anything that the Course is presenting it. It's just all of the rhetoric is, point blank. There is nothing here that we need have, a critical dialogue around. It's just very cut and dried, and there's no way out once you realize that you created a situation that is impossible. So the only thing to do is let go, and that's where.
Well, it asks us right there in that section, do you like what you made? Do you like it? That's eventually the point we get to when we say, you know what, I don't like this anymore. I'm sick of this. And then eventually we're all going to get to that stage where you say, there must be some different way of living in the world or seeing this. And it also says, you made this up in that section. You made this up. I don't want anyone to hear that and assume guilt or responsibility. The way I think of it is just the ego is a device. It's nothing in and of itself. It's just a little thing there that if you go and play with it, it will lead to pain. It will lead to emotional pain. But if you leave the ego alone, the ego is nothing. It has no power you at all. So when it says you made this up, it's not really saying that you made up the idea of sin, guilt, fear, separation. It's saying that you entertained these ideas and you haven't questioned them, and now you believe them. So it's this unlearning that needs to take place when you have the motivation that I don't want it anymore. I'm sick of it. I'm gonna leave the ego alone now because I realized that it hasn't really given me what I wanted. So yeah, I agree.
Yes, it is very insidious. It's the snake that slithers across on the floor, and when you see the snake, it's like, oh my God. Anyway, I'm going to go back up one paragraph here. You jumped ahead, and I think that probably was, part of the synchronistic nature of how we end up communicating here. So you kind of jumped straight into that idea that, all of this is something that we have manufactured in our own mind. But prior to that, it says, the holy do not interfere with truth. They are not afraid of it, for it is within the truth they recognize their holiness and rejoice at what they see. They look on it directly without attempting to adjust themselves to it or it to them. And so they see that it was in them, not deciding first where they would have it be. Their looking merely asks a question, and it is what they see that answers them. You make the world and then adjust to it, and it to you. Nor is there any difference between yourself and it in your perception, which made them both. So here we're getting that kind of a rebound back to that idea that you did create this, and it is an option for you to allow it to be uncreated. In other words, to slip out of it because you're so confused and you're so inclined to center on specifics like, oh, well, my life will be better as soon as I have $500,000 in my bank account. See, and it's that sort of approach that scatters your energy and scatters your capacity to actually be proactive and to make a difference. So when we arrive at a point where we're willing to allow an answer to come to us, what do I need to do next? Then the Holy Spirit will come through and give you the step-by-step directions to help you unravel your attachment to this material nightmare that you have created.
It's talking there about the fear we have, and the reason why we make adjustments to our relationships is we're afraid. That's what it is. There's no need to feel guilty about the fact that we do this. It's just we are afraid, and we think whatever life presents us with, whatever we see, needs changing, needs little adjustments. So let's think of somebody who has, they've got the rent due at the end of the week, and they lost their job, and they have to find money very, very quickly or something like that. Now, basically what they might decide that they're going to take a job. They need to take a job in a restaurant or a fast food place or something. And that might be, that's just in that situation, we'll say, that's what life presents. And of course, what we have is we say, well, this is a disaster. I don't want to do that job. And we make adjustments to how reality presents itself to us. We say it should be otherwise. It should be different. So what the course is trying to get us to do is, you don't become passive when you do this work, but it helps you to accept life as it presents itself to you, how other people present themselves to you, without the fear that leads you to think that, well, I need to change this. This isn't good enough. It's inner work that takes place where you drop that fear, you become more peaceful, and then you act. That's how the process works. So apologies for skipping that section because it was an important one, for sure.
Right, but I think that it was probably not a mistake in that, it can, the way the course is written, it's a dance. And sometimes, the choreography requires that we go to a different scene and then go back in order to understand, what the dance is all about. So it's right on track.
I will dance on, and the next section it starts off. It is number 5. I'm hoping. It opens with a question, and it says, "Have you not wondered what the world is really like? How it would look through happy eyes?" And I have certainly wondered that. To see the world with nothing but love, unconditionally, that would be incredible. So the world you see is but a judgment on, is it the world? Is it other people? It's a judgment on yourself. That's what the world is. That's what you see. It is not there at all. But judgment lays a sentence on it, justifies it, and makes it real. Such is the world you see, a judgment on yourself and made by you. This sickly picture of yourself is carefully preserved by the ego, whose image it is and which it loves, and placed outside you in the world. And to this world must you adjust as long as you believe this picture is outside and has you at its mercy. This world is merciless. And were it outside you, you should indeed be fearful. Yet it was you who made it merciless. And now it is mercilessness. And now if mercilessness seems to look back at you, it can be corrected. So I suppose it's saying here again that there's the internal world of beliefs, emotions, feelings, and we project that, whatever that is what we see out there. And it's saying that, you know, it would be a difficult place. We really would be in trouble here if our salvation lied in making adjustments in the world, because that is a very, very tiring process. We get tired of that, and it doesn't really work, because the real change that needs to take place is the evaluation on yourself. That's the bottom line here in all of this. And I suppose the way to do that is that you start to apply forgiveness to life as it presents itself to you, to other people as they present themselves to you. And as you do that, it's actually yourself that you're letting off the hook, okay, for this. Or it's actually the self-image of yourself that you start to disengage from, and you believe it less and less the more you give what we talked about in the last couple of videos, the gift of lilies, or forgiveness, to those around you in your life.
Exactly. And this world is very beautifully crafted to make you believe that you are powerless. And the truth of the matter is, you have all power. You have the ability to transform the world, not by going out and attacking it, but by surrendering this vision that you have created to that higher authority, to God itself, because the Holy Spirit is a projection of God that is within us. So when we think of the Holy Spirit, a lot of times there are all these different classifications of terms, and we're trying to put together a cosmology and you know, a ladder of importance and that sort of thing. But the truth is, it is just that remnant that is God, that is able to comprehend the world that we have created, our inner world, is a voice and a power that can transform the situations that we have created. So if you're sitting there worried about North Korea launching a nuclear missile, or about having, you know, an individual in the presidency in the United States who apparently has gone stark raving mad, then you have to own that. You have to realize, hey, I created this to make myself powerless in order to perpetuate this bizarre dream that I think is real.
Well, that's so true. And I think one of the ways, a great thing to consider when you're sort of thinking about this, is the use of time, and how we use time in the universe to maintain the illusion that you are a victim, and that you should be afraid and you're powerless. Because we're going to get onto this idea of powerlessness soon in this section. And earlier on in the course, it says that something that you have to accept here, and you have to accept this in your daily life, is that your mind is incredibly powerful. Now, most people don't think that their mind is powerful at all. They think it's useful for learning little skills for their work, or it's good for you know, learning language, or whatever, general knowledge and quizzes. But that's not what it's saying. It's saying you are a creator, you're a projector, and you are creative. There are no neutral thoughts. So everything that you think has an impact. There's cause, which are your thoughts, and the effects of those thoughts, what transpires in your life. And the use of time is a tricky one, because we have no respect for our minds. And we have these dark thoughts, these ego thoughts. And the thing about it is, you don't get evidence of the power of those thoughts immediately in this 3D universe, in this level of consciousness. It might take some time before the effects of that are thought. So if you're thinking of yourself, it's talking about the bad self-image we have of ourselves. If you're having these thoughts about how crappy you are, what a piece of shit you are, how unworthy you are, how much in danger you are, eventually, as time passes, the effects of those thoughts will present themselves to you. You will see them. That's what the world is for. It's a very, very sinister trick. So you have to get into the mindset of, no matter what life presents me with, I'm going to take full responsibility for it. Because if what the Course is saying is true, I am incredibly powerful. And then you start to have the more loving thoughts. You don't let the mind wandering come in anymore. You start to give, due care and attention to what is in your mind. You start to become aware of it and observe it. And like we were talking about earlier, Chris, about the development of trust, you start to see loving things out there day after day, week after week, and you start to learn that, I am powerful, and I choose to accept the version of myself, the self-image that this book is talking about.
Right. And one of the things you had made mention of is that, you have a thought and eventually it will show up as an experience. One of the effects of A Course in Miracles I have found, and a lot of people that I dialogue with about the Course, is that when you pick up the book and you actually start reading it and learning from it and going into it, you will go through a period where you have a shortening of the time between the thought and the response.
Yeah.
So you will definitely notice that things get actuated much more rapidly. And that's because you're sensitive to the fact that, you're beginning to awaken to the idea that your thoughts are real things in this world. And so your meaningless thoughts are going to show you a lot of meaningless experiences around you. So the Course does have that nature. It will speed up, it will accelerate the way that your life works. And that's the beauty of it, because it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It tells you this is going to happen, and then over the next 2 weeks you realize, damn, it's been happening. So that's the beauty of it.
I totally agree, and I have my own experiences of that in life. Even when I notice, I'll put 2 and 2 together and I'll track back my steps sometimes, and I can see the original judgment that had taken place of separation against somebody else, and the evidence of that will be in an emotion I feel, loneliness, or I will start to see myself as I saw that other person. And the thing to remember in this is, we don't respect the power of our minds because we don't really believe it. It's important to remember and to understand that we don't appreciate the power of our minds because we don't want it to be true. We don't want to think that we are incredibly powerful and we are responsible for everything that comes up in our life. Because if you are powerful, what we've done really with the ego is give all our power away, because we don't want to assume any responsibility for the things that happen. So that way we can, because we're still attached to this idea of guilt. And what we do is we say, well, it wasn't me. I'm powerless. I can't do anything. So it's sort of like, when you drop the silly concept of yourself as small and weak and guilty, it's great because you can start to take full responsibility for everything that shows up in your life. And the really cool part is you can start to see that you are an extension. You are a projector. You'll always project while you're here, but you start to project consciously. And you start to do it because you see yourself differently now. You see yourself as worthy, and you see everybody else around you as worthy. So it's a very exciting process.
Yes, it is exciting and transformative, and at the core of it, it is an awakening to what love really means. And I think that's the bottom line, is that life without an awareness of who you are is a journey of trying to find love, a mad scramble of running from outpost to outpost across the desert in hopes of finding a source of love. But once you start to awaken to the truth of your nature, you discover that you're not seeking love. You are fully capable of conducting love. You are a transmitter of love. And within that, you dwell in that state of loving awareness. So, yeah, we've got 5 paragraphs down, and I'm thinking maybe in a week we'll pick up with paragraph 6 here, because this is getting really juicy, and we've got a lot to talk about. How does that sound, David?
That sounds great, Chris. Yeah, we're really getting into some good stuff here. So
well,
we can continue again.
Yes, and how about that? The phone rings the minute I make mention of that. So I will see you in 1 week, David.
All right, Chris. Talk to you soon, friend.
Okay, bye.